Hello, hello, and welcome to Spoken Not Stirred. I am your host, Dauda Ladejobi. So, in this installment, we have a great conversation lined up with our February feature, which was Antonia Jade King. And at the end of the conversation, Antonia gives a great prompt for anyone who may be looking for inspiration for their writing. So, without any further delays, let's get straight into it. Hope you enjoy. And we are back. Yes. Welcome to the Spoken Not Stirred podcast. We are joined by the ever amazing Glasses on Fleek Antonia King. But
Hiya.
how are you doing? How you been?
I am all right, hanging in there. How are you doing?
I'm good. First off, thank you for featuring. It was
You're welcome.
no, we were seriously blown away. Yeah, I just thought, we'll just have a conversation really about you and your adult poetry and what you've been up. So first off, really and truly, what got you into poetry? What was your drive?
So I remember I think it was second or third year at uni, and there was this little spoken word night downstairs in the you know how most unis have the kind of cafe, which is also a bar, which is also the canteen, which is also like just where everything happens. It was there, and I remember I just stumbled on it completely in accident. I was actually in pajamas because I lived upstairs. And I remember just kind of like sitting down and watching some of like the local poets and the student poetry, and it was really good. And I just remember going upstairs and being quite inspired and thinking, there's stuff I want to say. And then I just kind of never looked back. Yeah.
Hey, where did you go uni?
I went to Royal Holloway in Egham.
Where?
Royal Holloway in Egham. No one knows my uni. It's this like quite small campus uni. It's technically University of London, but it's like because the University of London is split into like loads of colleges. And one is in Surrey. And when I signed up to go there, I did think it was in actual London. So I got slightly duped and spent like 3 years in Surrey. But it was cool. It's a really lovely uni.
Wait, Egham.
Egham in Surrey. Yeah, literally the only thing there is the campus.
I don't know why I expected that you was writing from young. You've got this kind of or in your writing that I would have thought that you was just being, I don't know, like like child writers. I thought you was one of.
Oh, that's sweet. I mean, like I did. I've always kind of been interested in novels, so I've had like novel ideas from a bit younger. But in terms of like poetry, it was second year of uni. I mean, I still think 18, 19 is quite young. I look back at me on that age and I'm like, I was a literal baby. But
what was you like every 18, 19-year-old and thought you had it figured out?
Oh, 100%. I thought I knew everything. And I even the poetry, I look back on some of the poetry I wrote at that age and the embarrassment is very real. I can't believe I ever like said that in front of people. But growth, we move, we grow, we develop. Thank God.
I've lost a lot of my poetry, and part of me thanks the fact that I don't have to read back some of the stuff I've written like when I was that age, because even the stuff I've been able to look back on, I feel like.
How did you lose your poetry?
Because I write a lot of stuff on my phone, and I used to lose phones like so irresponsibly. I look back at it now, and I lost phones. I could see where the stress from my parents would come and why they would on your phone, because I did lose quite a few phones, and
Wow.
I used to write on newspaper as well. Like I never write. Even now, I've got notebooks, but I will paper.
Okay, which is like random bits of like A4 paper. That's quite reckless in a very interesting way. I quite actually rate that as a creative process. And what do you do with the bits of paper? Do you then put it online?
No, I hope I learn it, because
I
don't my poetry online. Like,
right.
I post performances, post videos. I don't post them. So yeah, it is reckless.
So you write it on a bit of paper to memorize it, record it, post it. And that actually does ban.
Yeah, that's essentially it. And then if you lose the paper and you don't remember your poem.
Yeah, that sounds really fun.
Yeah. It's not as fun as writing a book though.
Ah,
And that's definitely one way to never lose your poem. So
I mean, yeah, for sure. I have had to buy quite a few copies because I've lost my copy though. Uh, which is which is fun. But like I'll go to a gig and I'll like try and get it to read from and I'll have lost it. But yeah, that is one way. Or Google Docs.
writing on a laptop is weird. That's interesting. How is that your process? What
Yeah.
is your writing process? What's your writing process?
I always start with paper. Um always start with paper and then usually put it on Google Docs and then it's there. Because I used to be more of like a recording performances or memorizing it to go to a night and perform, but I'm a bit more like pagey. I'm a bit more like pagey now. So yeah, I tend to put off on mine. Also because I'm playing around with form a bit more than I used to. I like seeing it on page and working out how it looks.
So I've never really understood like form. like just
Well, how we're both using our hands more. Form is weird. I think I probably understand like 2% of it. Um, yeah, it actually that came from when I was writing the book because before I hadn't really thought about it, and then I kind of thought about the page a bit more when I was actually like looking into publishing and working a lot with Amy at Bad Betty on like how it looks and using the page almost as a poetic device, almost as you'd use any other poetic device, making it work for the poem, thinking, okay, what makes sense for the poem? How should this poem look? How can I use how the poem looks to contribute to meaning? And it's really fun. It's actually really fun. I never thought I'd get into it. Again, like at 18, 19, when I was just like writing down things to say, I never thought like all these years later I'd be like playing around with form and stuff. But it's really good fun. I like it a lot.
sick. And do you think that process of writing for page as opposed to writing to purely perform changed the way change your poetry, changed the way you write your poetry, well, in essence, but also changed how you I guess flows or is delivered or how you then deliver that message on with your
That's a really good question. I want to say yes, but I don't know if it's necessarily changed my poetry or just given me another aspect of poetry to think about. Like I don't actually know that it's changed the words, it's changed the content, it's changed what I want to do with poetry. But I think it's definitely given me something else to think about within my poetry. So I would say yes and no. I like to think it hasn't changed my content too much. I still very much think orally when it comes to poetry. Like that is still where my head goes most of the time, but it's definitely given me something else to think about, I would say.
it's an odd thing with this whole performance as opposed
Mm-hmm.
to poetry. And I think poetry is poetry and performance is just how you deliver. You can deliver page poetry or any poetry in a performance kind of element. So I think sometimes because we're not thinking of all of the other things that page poetry
Mm-hmm.
would deliver, we
Yeah.
limit ourselves in what we can write and what we do as performance poets. So no, I can definitely see it adding an asset, adding something extra to your poetry rather than it just changing it totally or taken away. But I think it's just an interesting thing.
Yeah, for sure. And I think like it's really interesting in the scene. There's almost like this kind of odd divide, which seems to have almost developed between like people who are more performance poets and people who are pagey. And it's so unnecessary because some of my like favorite poetry collections are from poets that started on the stage and still spend the majority of time on the stage. Like Danez Smith's collections are some of the most objectively beautiful collections I've ever read, regardless of that like kind of false dichotomy that has kind of developed. And I feel like if the poetry is good, it's going to work in both arenas. And I think this also goes for page poets who maybe think like, oh, I can't put together a good performance. No one's going to want to see this on stage. You need to spend more time with my poetry and stuff. And I feel like I'm definitely with you on that. Like poets really shouldn't limit themselves to either exclusively performing or not performing. And I would urge performance poets to put together like manuscripts and send them off to publishers and stuff because yeah, performance poetry collections bang. And there were some awesome presses that focus most of their time on publishing like performance poets. So yeah, I would definitely agree.
Yeah. Sick, sick, sick. And I like how from you said how page poets also would feel like they can't do performance. I feel like performance is performance in every element, so it's just a thing to work at. Just find your voice within what you've written, which you probably know because you've written it, and then just bring that.
Right.
Yeah, totally. I remember I did one Bolt's poet project thing, and it was the first time I had to think about what a poem looks like on page because it was definitely going to be published, kind of thing.
Right.
And yeah, that it was an interesting experience. I can see how would it add something, and you think a bit differently sometimes as well when you know it's definitely going to be a printed thing. So no, that is interesting. So we touched on content for a second there. So
Yeah.
just with regards to like, what is your conscious decision? Because your poetry is when I was first introduced to your poetry, it was very much your identity as your identity, and it had that Maya feel to it, like like 100. I think it's also because like I know from
Yeah.
that you are a fan. So I think that it really came out. But are you conscious on content, or are you like a free write and what comes out comes out?
Both, I think. Yeah, both, I would say. There's definitely some times where I'll think, oh, okay, this event has happened. I've had this really in-depth conversation with someone. I've had this day where we've gone somewhere and I kind of think there might be a poem in there and I'll work on it that way. And there were other times where I'll just sit down 10 minutes to free write and then see if something comes out. So I would say both. I would say, yeah, there's definitely things that I want to approach with poetry and then I'll do that. And there were other times when I just write for the sake of writing and see if something develops. I would say I journal every night as well, for like a minimum of 10 minutes, and a lot of my poetry will kind of come from journal entries. It's definitely like I've tried to be a bit more external with my poetry in the past, like write about things that don't affect me so much, and it hasn't gone well. No, I just can't. Like, I don't know if it's because I'm a Leo or just because I'm not that skilled at writing out of my experience yet. It could be either, but could be both. But I just when I try and write about situations that aren't in my life, I don't know. I read it back and it just seems inauthentic. I don't know why. It's something that I would like to get better at because I don't like the fact that I'm a poet who can't really write outside of my own experiences. That doesn't feel right to me, but it's just something I haven't cracked yet.
No, I know the feeling.
Yeah, are you the same?
Yeah. To a large extent, I'm always very conscious of like trying to take the poetry out of myself. I don't know. I think it's an easy thing to do as poets as well, and it makes sense because where you're talking from your perspective, you're talking through your voice, through yours. It's the natural thing to do. I think also is just to always talk from your from your perspective. So I totally understand it, and I think it's difficult. I don't know how
so hard.
But I also feel like if it's your voice and if that's how it comes out, I'd rather it come out like that rather than sound inauthentic. And like
it is also something to be wary of when you're writing about something outside of your own experiences. I think particularly if it's a political situation or I would say it's something to exercise caution on and something I haven't really grasped yet. And even like outside of political situations and the kind of Facebook poetry, like I've got friends who write this like amazing poetry about myth and legend or like nature, and I can't.
Nature poetry is amazing.
I love it. I would love to like be able to do it, but I can't. I'd love to be able to write like about myth and legend as well. Like I've had some even like amazing sci-fi poetry.
Have you tried? Like, have you approached it? Have you sat down? Okay. What did you?
It did not go. As I say, like I read stuff back, and unless it's unless it's literally about my life. I just haven't cracked that yet. I keep trying.
What else can we do?
Exactly. Keep trying, keep attempting. One day I'll crack it. So.
Yeah. Do you find that in this, because personally for me, I feel like one thing that could be holding people back is also this age of not wanting to say the wrong things about something we know about. Do you find that a lot, especially trying to write for something outside of your experience? Do you find that as a restriction, or?
So I'm trying to think, like, because when I try and write outside of my own experiences, it doesn't tend to be like political as such. So it doesn't tend to like be about an event that's affected a marginalized group that I'm not part of. It tends to be me trying more to like approach, I don't know, sci-fi writing or nature poetry or anything like that. But I think it is something that is probably holding other writers back. Oh my gosh, I know, like towards the last year when obviously the George Floyd event happened, and there was a lot of like white allies trying to write poetry, and it was an interesting time to be a poet on social media, and I just feel like exercise caution, I would say. Yeah, I would say so. I don't want to like tell people like they can't approach certain things with poetry, or that this caution should hold them back, but I would also say, does this need to be a poem that you write, if that makes sense? Like, just does this need to be something that you write and then share?
Yeah.
And if you feel like the answer is yes, then I'm not going to tell you that you're wrong, but I would just urge you to ask that question to yourself.
And that's a good way to approach posting stuff online in general. Is your voice, and I think one of the questions is your voice relevant for this right now? Like, I understand you've written great and you put your emotions and your thoughts out. Is your voice relevant?
Yes, for sure. And does this need to be something that you post publicly as well? Because I would also urge people to journal and write for the sake of writing, not sharing. If you're trying to think through your take on something and how you fit into something and how you can support the people in your life and how you can, I don't know, interrogate certain parts of yourself that you feel like you need interrogating, you should absolutely do that with writing. But then the sharing is maybe where you can think, okay, so writing this poem was really good for me in terms of interrogating how I feel about this event and what I can do moving forward to best support people in my life and all of that. And I get that. I get how there's some writing you need to do in there. But do I need to read it? Do I need to be involved in this internal process that you're having? Because the minute you make something public, you
Inviting everyone else into it.
Yeah.
And like it's so true and so real. But I read something earlier today, and I think it adds to what that situation could be about. It was about how like artists have become content creators, and art is now content, and it drives us to then basically just keep putting things out, and maybe that very much it plays into that not being able to think too far forward how relevant your voice is in certain things because it's content. Yeah. Do you feel with your poetry that you are, and your social media, that you are driven by the content era? Like, do you feel that urge to share, or are you just very content knowing that my stuff is going to come out at this time, and you've got your book out like that?
It's interesting because I would say yes, but I don't often do that with poetry. I used to be the person where something would happen and I think, oh, okay, this is like something I need to write and share. But now I just I share my opinions about things separate to poetry, I would say. Increasingly so. My poetry has become a bit more introspective, I would say. Maybe I don't want to say less political because the personal is political and all of that, but I would say less Facebook video type political. So I'll share my opinions about things separately to poetry, I would say now. So I'm definitely someone who wants to share my opinions. I feel like that's just a part of who I am. but I've kind of stopped doing that with poetry, I would say now, which is interesting. I'm not sure how long that'll happen, because there's definitely been some stuff where I'm like, okay, I feel like there's a poem here. But at the moment, I tend to more just go on Twitter rants and then write about something different.
All right, cool. I haven't got into Twitter rants yet. I don't.
Oh, you do jokes on Twitter. You should.
I don't understand Twitter. I'm just.
What?
I feel like an old person. I can't lie to you. I'm like, Twitter was the first app that made me feel old. But obviously now TikTok's come around.
Oh, yeah. I was gonna say Twitter's for kind of our generation. I would say TikTok's the one that like I'm leaving to the 18-year-olds, because it's way too creative for me. Like, I don't like, they're fully doing like video editing and
there's a lot
really making films just on an app. It's very confusing. I'll stick to just Twitter runs, I think. I follow them all because like I'm in awe of that generation and their creativity and their political drive. So I just kind of watch and clap from afar.
Yeah, that's one thing I've been quite surprised by, is the political element. I mean, TikTok at one point was, a big driver for, I think it was the US elections and stuff like that. So it's like,
yeah. Did you hear a bunch of 18-year-olds bought out all the tickets to a Trump rally and then just didn't turn up because they were free? So they just like booked out entire stadiums and then just didn't turn up.
The whole political movement's off TikTok. That's
political movements. Yeah, for sure.
That's amazing. That is amazing. Wanted to also talk about, because next to poetry, you've just been out here just like murking lives. So what were you doing? Your masters you did now? No, you've done your masters. What are you doing?
PhD, attempting. At it. Yeah.
How's that balance been of like the study element, which is, research heavy and kind of all of that, and then balancing that with the poetry and writing a book and all of that research and all of that different writing as well. How's that been?
That's really nice of you to assume that I have successfully balanced it, because I wouldn't. That's very kind of you to assume that I've successfully managed to do that. I would argue that I haven't. But thank you for that assumption. Do you know what though? What I would say is, because I'm someone who I'm always like, spend time with your poetry, right? Like I'm someone who I'm always like, spend time, write it, leave it for a week, come back, see what it's saying, pick up on different things and work. And that's what I'm finding hard. I'm actually like, fitting in the writing time for me is quite easy, because writing comes quite instinctively. Like I love a free write. I love a journal at the end of the day. Like I've always got 4 new poems on the go. But what I'm struggling to find time with is that time that the poem needs after it's been written. Yeah, I mean, furlough, like I'm on furlough at the moment. That's definitely helped. I've definitely got more poetry writing done than before. So when furlough ends, who knows? I feel I plan out my days to the hour. I'm that person. So I've got a week planner, and I literally like plan out my days to the hour. To just, how? I don't know. I just have to.
I mean, how is it possible? As in, so I mean, okay.
I'm tempted to show you it. It's really wild.
I mean, you do go out of the hour every now and then, though, right? It doesn't always stick to the hour.
Yeah.
Amazing.
You know what? It actually gives me more freedom, because otherwise, like, because my PhD is a time-consuming thing, right? And I feel like I'm someone who I'll get really engrossed in a task. So I will I'm working on my literature review for my PhD now, and I'm someone who I would get it up on the screen and I would look up 5 hours later and have not done anything else with my day, and then not have done any creative writing, not have done a workout, not have done any of the other things that kind of allow me to I don't know, be a balanced human. So I feel like planning my day out for me, and I literally set the reminders on my phone. and I need to, because otherwise I'll just, or like other way around, like I'll start a poem and I'll just get really involved in like the creative side of my brain, and I'll just look up again 5 hours later and have not done like any PhD work for the day, and have to explain to my supervisor that like things aren't ready. So it's just awkward both ways. And I feel like I'm doing my PhD part-time because I kind of wanted the balance. I didn't want to become someone who like spends their whole life in the library and isn't engaging the creative side of my brain and all of that. So yeah, I do try to plan out my days. I don't plan out my Sundays, if that makes me seem a little bit less type A. I don't. Sundays is like chill. So I have one day that isn't planned.
Sunday's God's day. Let God plan Sunday. You know.
Yeah, exactly. Sunday is God's day. You relax. So
yeah, I find it interesting. You don't find writing a PhD creative. I always look at researchers and stuff like that as a creative thing. I've never understood the strength of it. What I guess do you find to be the difference? Like what is it that you're engaging differently when you're doing research for your PhD rather than doing research for a poem?
That's really interesting. I'm thinking about that now, and I suppose it is creative in a different way. At the moment, it definitely isn't, because at the moment I'm in the kind of reading stage. So it's very much engaging the kind of like analytical, like reading and just trying to get to grips with what's already been written on my topic and things like that. So at the moment, it definitely isn't creative. Further down the line, when it's time to write, I guess that's a little bit similar, but it's so formulaic in the way you have to write when you write a PhD. Like, you can't refer to, it's a weird thing in academia, like you can't refer to yourself. You can only refer to like the thesis. So you can't be like, I'm going to argue. You have to be like, this thesis will argue. Which in my mind just makes me sound like I'm sorry. In my mind, I just sound like an idiot, because I'm like, the thesis isn't a sentient being. The thesis can't argue anything. It's a collection of words on a document. Like the thesis isn't doing anything because it doesn't have a consciousness.
This joint between PhD and poet now.
Are you getting it? Yeah.
But the thesis can't argue.
The thesis can't. It can't do anything.
Because we've just been talking about your PhD, and I'm betting like people listen to it be like, what is her topic? Like what?
Oh, okay. So my topic is the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Yeah, so I'm looking at the historical and the cultural significance of the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, essentially, is what I'm doing. Because it's an awesome show. And people look at particularly Black popular culture and they just kind of think, oh, it's popular culture, but it's hugely significant, and it reached a really wide audience, and we're still talking about it now, and it gave a voice to issues that were being ignored by news and other outlets. So that's what I'm looking at, and I'm really enjoying it. I get to watch the Fresh Prince and call it research, so that's really good fun.
You just found a cheat sheet.
I did. Yeah. Oh yeah, I found a cheat sheet. It's great.
Like, come on there. I remember you were telling me about this. I remember thinking, because I moved to England. So, I came here when I was like 7 or 8. And Fresh Prince was one of those, assimilation tools. It's one of those things that, this is how people see young Black men, and this is how a cool young Black man would be able to integrate in the Western world, be it obviously America, but as everyone got references, I think that was I saw significance in it, because, Will Smith was one of the few young Black figures we really got until we got like Kerching and stuff like that. Until BBC started kicking up proper representation. So yeah, no, it's sick. You've had some.
That's so interesting to me, because like you're really not the first person who said it's kind of like a assimilation tool, and it's interesting to me from a British perspective how much we rely on American pop culture in general as well. I spoke to someone who was talking about the Fresh Prince in South Africa, because that era in like that decade in South African politics is wild to have the Fresh Prince, and apparently it was like popular with all demographics, and that's just wild to me.
Sounds a bit. Actually, that is interesting. I even like the relationships of South Africa. Just relationships. Yeah, that's. But everyone likes, as in all demographics. I find that.
Yeah, well, I was talking to a white South African who was like, this aired during like a really obviously, yeah, shocking era in South African politics, and everyone loved it.
What do you think that still kind of speaks more to the whole people are able to laugh with you and not feel your pain bit? Because, you know, black people always been seen as entertainment. Yeah. And, you know, actually now thinking about it in that sense, maybe I'm not as surprised that they were able to, you know, enjoy the comedy.
The disconnect, right? It's the disconnect. And this is the thing about, like, obviously we need to think about this in terms of poetry as well. It's disconnect between like what's viewed as entertainment and what's viewed as actually something that's going to influence change. And, you know, if you're laughing with someone, are you listening to them? Or, you know, you can listen to a 2-minute poem or watch a 20-minute episode and then go home. And how much does that actually change things?
Yeah, man, don't just listen, feel.
Yeah, and I fully believe that, you know, in terms of like poetry and TV and anything like that can change the world, but it's about how you consume it, right? And who's consuming it and how. Yeah.
I don't want to keep you for too long. This has actually been a really good conversation. Just yeah, I don't know what it is. I don't know what all these movements are. This is how we navigate through life now. Just okay. This is all. I forget. This is also audio, so I'm just making pure hand movements that no one who's listening can actually enjoy. So it's just a bit silly, isn't it? So before we leave, I just wanted to ask, with regards to, you know, prompts and what gets you writing, and if you have any prompts that you think people would enjoy, or if you've had any prompts you've been given before that you thought, oh, that's really cool, people should write like this.
Yeah, so I'm trying to pass a particular prompt on to like anyone I can, which is, I was lucky enough to do the writing room with Rachel Long, and she was talking about like using your name as inspiration for a poem, and I would urge anyone to do that. If you haven't written about your name or written into your name yet, it's a really interesting tool, and everyone who I've seen follow this prompt has come up with like a dope poem. So I would say that one. I would also urge people to start journaling. I feel like there's a perception that our days aren't really interesting enough to journal at the moment because we're all just at home. But I would say keep a journal, and on a Sunday, like, go back, read through, and chances are there's a poem there.
I'm personally like, there's a poem in everything, but you know.
Yeah, exactly. Do you journal?
No. Sorry.
Why? Like, everyone should journal.
No, I do believe everyone should journal. I don't journal just because, like, I just don't plan it. I don't make time to do so. And my thought on what I would do to journal would be to film stuff. I don't know what it is. I've noticed, even like with my Instagram, stuff like that. I like video. I like things moving. I like things kind of talking to me. So yeah. You know, this is us journaling.
My friend keeps a video journal for 5 minutes every night.
You know, for me, I can't lie. It's just planning to do things. Like, I'm also once I've planned to do things and it becomes a chore, it puts me off the idea of doing things. So I like to keep things as
stubborn. You're stubborn. If you're like, if I have to do it, I won't. Okay, I get you.
I mean, you say it like that, it doesn't sound. I just like to keep certain elements of creativity spontaneous.
That actually makes sense. I think that's good. I need to get back into a little bit of spontaneity as well, I feel.
Yeah, especially I feel, you know, once this year, when we know that we're basically waking up and being in a house. Like, there needs to be some random things that could possibly happen. So I welcome randomness. I welcome randomness. Right. Well, yeah. Thank you, Antonia. Also, do you just want to
Thank
let
you.
me know about your book? She too is a sailor. That's out on Bad Betty.
Oh yeah. So my book, She Too is a Sailor, it's been out for a while now, yeah, but it's with Bad Betty Press. And Bad Betty are a really awesome press. They're a small indie publisher run by Jake Hall and Amy Aker, and they are awesome and they publish just dope poets. So I would urge you to follow them as well, check them out. They're just, I think, in the process of announcing their upcoming authors for the next year. So it's really
Sick. And your book is absolutely dope. What's the one? The Bones. That's just like, oh, it's so good. You just turned whatever I did into a dance routine. You're so made for TikTok. Think about this.
Damn, if I wasn't 26, I would be so good on TikTok. If I was at 18 now, I fully believe I could have made it on TikTok.
Creativity has no limits, has no age limits, has no age restrictions. I mean, if you want to that downward that you just did shows me that the dancer is in you. You just well,
because every time Beyonce releases a new song, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna create the dance challenge for this. Like, this is gonna be my moment. I'm gonna, because like they all do the dance challenges and stuff. I'm like, this is gonna be the one I do. And then every time I go on TikTok, some 18-year-old from somewhere in America has already done it and smashed it.
We nearly went this whole interview and didn't talk about Beyonce. How dare we?
It wasn't gonna happen.
I don't know if I was making a conscious choice not to, because I know you're a massive fan, but I was like, we ain't got to talk about Beyonce.
Yeah, but I always think okay, let me create a dance challenge, or go on TikTok and do something fun. I'll come up with an idea for a TikTok and I'll go on it, and some 18-year-old's already done it. Every time.
They're quick these days. Let's quit these days. It's the youth in them. I mean,
this is what I mean. I'm so proud of that generation, but they're stressing me out.
Right. Sorry. I feel like this is a good place to start winding down. I feel like it's getting heated. We're cussing 18-year-olds. We're making
I'm not cussing. I love them all. They are a very creative, amazing generation, but they're too fast.
All right. But no, shout out the 18-year-olds, man. Shout out to you.
100%.
Keep going. But yeah, is there anyone that you would also want to just kind of shout out at the moment? Anyone you think's doing great, or any collections, anything that you've seen lately you think, yo, you're sick?
So I'm gonna shout out 2 collections. I mean, they did really well. People probably have heard of these collections, but I read them when they came out, and now I've reread them, and I'm just, they're collections that I feel like the more time you spend with them, the more you get from them. And Morgan Parker is probably, I would say, definitely one of, if not my favorite poet kind of publishing at the moment. She's got 2 collections. The 2 collections I'm going to specifically mention are There Were More Beautiful Things Than Beyonce and Magical Negro, and they're both just exceptional. I love them so much. And I would also shout out Danez Smith, Homie, because I spent more time with that collection recently as well. So yeah, I would say if you haven't checked out those poets and those collections, they're great. And particularly Danez Smith's collection really ties in to what I was saying earlier about kind of bridging the gap between performance and page, and writing in a way where the work can exist in both spaces and be exceptional in both spaces.
Thank you. Whoa, yeah. If people wanted to hear more, or just get updates on what Antonia's been up to, check her Insta, which is
Antonia Jade King.
Bam! I knew that. I just wanted you to say it. Sick. Well then, thank you so much, Antonia. Very much appreciate.
Thank you.
A lot with your PhD and all the research. Thank you again for featuring Spoken Not Stirred.
It's an awesome night. Everyone's so lovely.
See you, man. I love you
Good
too.
people. Good people.
They are. They're a great bunch. And somehow they let me host. Thank you everyone for listening. Have a great day. Keep safe.
Peace, peace, peace.